About 2 months ago, I got a phone call from Kim Weckstrom. And Kim said, Donn, we would like you to talk at this year's Classic Yacht Symposium. And I said, well, that sounds nice. So what is it that you would like me to talk about? And he said, well, we want you to talk about, the joy and the beauty of it all. And I was like, oh, yeah, no problem. Sure, I'll be there, When is this? Oh, it's in February. Okay, great, fantastic, And I said, I'll be there, and I hung up the phone. And then it hit me. Donn, you just committed to embarrassing yourself in front of a large group of people you don't even know. Think about it. If someone asks you to talk on a subject in front of a large group of people, one would assume that you are an expert in the field, that you are an authority on the subject. An expert and an authority on joy and beauty? That's a really personal thing. Every one of you is an expert and an authority on joy and beauty. But I did it, and I'm here to embarrass myself. But I really do need to narrow this down, because what Kim really meant was the joy and beauty of sailing. And so that takes us on a journey that we all know can develop into a lifetime passion. So here is my personal but embarrassing take on the joy and beauty of sailing. That 7-year-old kid is when it started. There are moments and events that change the direction of your life. Sometimes this happens to us. And that happened to this 7-year-old kid. One early July morning, I slid out the back door with my bamboo fishing pole, a tin bucket, and a frozen box of Achilles, and walked down a dirt road to a narrow path leading through the bulrushes, and there were planks laid end for if there was a high tide or a lot of rain, it would keep it from getting stuck in the muck. And I went out into the small clearing. The sun had only been up for about an hour, but it was in the middle of the summer, and you could feel the heat already. But there was a cool north breeze coming down the river out to the Great South Bay. And I was taking this all in at 7 years old. And as I sat there and I looked over the river, it had rained the night before, and the air was really clean. And the light gave a definition to everything. All the colors were really vibrant. And I got to my fishing, and I baited my hook, and I got the line over, and I'm looking at the river, and the snappers are just breaking water all the way up and all the way down the river. And as I was fishing and doing quite well, I noticed how quiet it was. It was a Sunday morning. Most people were either sleeping late or they were in church. But there was no one closer to God than that 12-year-old. The fishing was good. So I'm there fishing, and I'm doing quite well, and I hear this sound behind me. I could hear the footsteps on the planks, and I turn around, and here, emerging into this small little cleared area, are a young couple dressed in white. He's about 15, she's about 14. And they say, good morning. We change courtesies, and he says, how's the fishing? And without saying anything, I just reached down and tilted my bucket so he could look in, and it was about half full of fish. And the three of us just stood there, and I got back to the serious business of fishing. And I'm fishing for a while, and then all of a sudden I hear another sound from across the river, and I look over, and there is a 1906 36-foot Gill Smith P-class gaff rig racing sloop coming right at me. It just tacked, and it's working its way up against the light north breeze. And I dropped my pole and my jaw, and I looked at this thing coming at me. And in that morning light, it was really beautiful. And as they were approaching the dock, they eased the sheets, and the boat just glided right up alongside, and the young couple stepped onto the deck. And the skipper put the helm over, and as the boat turned, you could see this rolling tumble home transitioning into this beautiful elliptical radius transom. And on that transom was the name Kidd, K-I-D. And as he continued to turn and go down the river out into the Great South Bay, the big wooden boom came sweeping across the stern like a big door opening up that I walked through and never looked back. Now, many years later, I'm at a dinner at the New York Yacht Club, and I'm sitting around with a bunch of sailors, and the dinner conversation is based around, how did this happen to us? We're all boat nuts. All we do is talk about boats. We did building boats, sailing boats. So the gentleman on my right said, for me, I spent my, right up until the time I was in college, sailing with my father on his Olden schooner up and down the New England coast. And across, for me, was this gal, and she said, when I was a teenager, I used to race with my uncle. I couldn't get enough of it, and I'm still racing to this day. And then I told them the story I just told you. Well, about 2 days go by, and I have an appointment in Manhattan, in New York City, with a client that we were working on a project together. And, at Park Avenue, up to the 19th floor, and I walk into his office, and he said, Donn, you remember last night at dinner you were telling that story about Kidd? And I said, yeah, no, of course, yeah, I remember. And then he said something, he said, I was something about the name, and I looked into it, and my grandfather, Joseph Lawrence, used to own Kidd from the early 40s to the early 50s. And then he said something I'll never forget. He said, we got a builder. And, excuse me? He said, we need to recreate the Kidd just like she was. Exactly 50 years from the time that boom swept across the stern of that boat, we launched Kidd 2. Excuse me here for a second. Lose my place. There is joy and beauty in every part of sailing. There's the boat. There's the team. And there's the relationship of people working together. And then there's just the pure joy and beauty of sailing. And when you bring all of these parts together, you have a total immersion in the sensory experience. So let's start with the boat. And the boat begins with the design, and that design is based around its intended use. But it is right here where the beauty begins, the sweetness of the lines, drawing the perfect sheer, the purposeful and honest business of the sections, the shapes, the curves, and something that is just pleasant to look at. Isn't that a definition of beauty? One can derive joy in the balance and harmony of the whole, where everything is working together to bring the boat to life. And that's whether it's a 12-foot beetle cat or a 160-ton schooner. But after this important process of design, the fun continues. We get to draw the boat out on the shop floor full size. And for the first time, you can really see the boat. And the beauty reveals itself. And the joy of construction is about to begin. It's the selection of timber. 8, that's the 8-meter, US 41 is the sail number. That log is Defender. That's where it starts, due to my good friend, John Laminitz Van Buren. So, and then after the selection of timber for its each intended use, we get to the construction. We have the ballast, and we're fairing up the ballast to receive the wooden keel. American white oak. And then we put the backbone together, and we put the molds in. You can see the beautiful shape there. And then on the molds, we bend the rib ends. They are going to help us bend the frames in. And the framing process begins. And then we begin the process of planking. Here she is framed out, shear strake is on, and the process of planking has begun. We're getting there. It takes a while. Now, this is exciting, and you can feel this thing coming together now. It's really coming together. You can see the boat. And we have a tradition in America, or certainly in our boat building sheds, that when the planking process starts, it's probably the longest process of wooden boat, when you're building a wooden boat, is the planking. So what we do is we take a bottle and we hang it from the stern before we start planking. If there was ever a carrot out in front of the donkey, this is it. Because you don't take the bottle down until the planking is complete. And that last plank that goes on is called a shutter plank. And after that shutter plank goes on, you get to have what we call a shutter party. And that's a celebration of planking her up. Now, I didn't break these guys out of jail for this photo shoot. But by the end of this bottle, they may be going to jail. I don't know what's going on. But anyway, happy bunch, the plankers, and she's all planked up. But now we can get up on deck, where we're dropping now the deck beams into place. And we get to varnish the interior. You can see the beautiful shape of the boat, the contrast between the framing and the Alaskan yellow cedar planking. And the beautiful sweeping deck shear gets our covering boards. And now we're really cooking. The deck's getting planked up, and the cabin sides are getting set. And just the sheer enjoyment of detailing, it's the highest level of adornment, and it takes us to a place in time where the character of the vessel is distinct from any other boat. The interior is complete. These are very simple boats, as is the hull. And eventually you go from this to this. And at this point, she's coming out of the barn, and if you can see, she's already got a bow wake going up to the heavens. Who knew? And from the barn to the railway, and a launch and a celebration. Which brings us to the team. Well, I'm sorry, there's the design. The whole thing, the design to the construction to the joy of sailing. Boom, boom, boom. There you go. Which brings us to the team and the relationship of working together. For me, this is the most joyous of all of the experience. The collaboration on the design, the construction, and creating the right environment, solving problems with a group where everyone is involved. And they want to find the right solution. And it's not a matter of who finds it. It's a matter when the whole group knows it's right. And when they know it's right, it fits. The joy of learning from one another and being part of a process that is fulfilling. There's those guys again. And as serious as the work is, and there's usually a lot of money on the line, and it is serious, there's still lots of fun and laughs to have during the process. The pure pleasure of knowing that you are a part of an energy that can only be found in a shared experience. And it often ties together lifelong friendships. And this bond is further perpetuated and made more solid at sea. For sailing connects us to the environment and the natural world around us. It takes us back to the dominant forces in our lives, and we get the opportunity to put to use all of the joy and the beauty that has come before us. Thank you. I'd like to introduce Peter Brauné. Peter's my master technician. He's a marine photographer and did many of the images up there. He's a skipper of an 8-meter and my longtime drinking partner.
Before you go,
hold on, one more.
I know, but before you go any further, I would like to introduce Linda.
But there is a kind of on this same topic. Tom Nitch had done a movie called Slippin' the Lines. You must see this movie. It's about why we all go to sea. And highly recommend it. I guess Google Tom? Yeah.
Yeah. What, and I got a microphone. Yeah, what we'll do is we'll put the link to Tom's movies on the Classic Symposium website.
Oh, good.
So if you go there, you can find Tom, and really easy. Have a look at the short clips and then order them too. Okay.
Great.
You can't go yet. I've got a question.
Oh, okay.
I can't remember which one though. What do you want to talk about?
Who's paying for all this beer? Is what
I've got 4 now. So.
Okay.
Hey, I had 2 questions. You can pick one of them. I think we're running out of time otherwise. So I have one, which I think is a burning question for me at least, is who's going to take over? And when I say who's going to take over, you look at the know-how and the passion and the love that we all have for these old clunkers. Someone's got to take over. How's that going to happen? What do we need to do to make sure that we get the next generation to take over and start sailing, the 68s, the 12s, the classic boats, the scary cruisers? What do we need to do, our sort of generation, to bring the next generation in and get them as passionate as we are about it?
Well, I know for us in our yard, we do have quite a few young people coming in and working for us. I think the important thing is if we can continue to employ them, if we can continue to get projects and employ the young people so they have a job where it makes sense, at least financially, which has always been a bit of a mystery to me. We've just been very lucky. But I think that's a start, and I think the more we're able to restore these boats, build recreations of them, and keep them in the public's eye, that 7-year-old boy is gonna. I often think down at Saint-Tropez where they have all of these classic boats lined up along the quay, and I think, boy, this 7-year-old kid is looking at this boat, this beautiful Fife here. It's got to do something to him. And I think that we have done a lot in the last 40 years. There's been a wonderful resurgence. Right now, it seems to be a little bit of a dip. Let's just hope it's a dip and we can continue to keep it going.
Okay.
We do our best.
Radio. Hey, thank you for coming over.
Have you done?